Hey, folks, Studio here with a breakdown of the Jayce patch notes for League of Legends. The date is July 6, 2012. Let's go ahead and look at the patch notes. I will be looking at them from two perspectives. One, a design perspective, like how it affects, Riot internally, what they thought about it. And two, a tournament perspective, will it matter a lot for, pro games? So already starting it off, there's just, some nice little bug fixes. There's a lot of these. I will not go too in depth with them. Essence Theft not getting HP though means you will no longer see random bursts of HP coming out from Ahri. Nice little change, but Akali. Now, Crescent Slash. When you use Crescent Slash, do you even remember what it is? If I say Crescent Slash, do you know what skill I'm talking about? Because it's not her Q, it's not her Mark of the Assassin. Crescent Slash, as it is right now, is not considered a very good skill. Until it's maxed out, the damage on it is actually pretty low. You're more likely just to go out of energy with Akali if you do spam Crescent Slash. So they want to make it more usable. They want to make it so there's actually a reason to put points into the skill, and it matters. Her kit right now, it's all about Assassin Shroud, her ultimate, and of course Mark of the Assassin. And now it's kind of adding that skill and it's making it a bit more usable because as it is now, it's not too important. Now, activating Mark of the Assassin when you use it is a pretty big deal because right now there is no, range way to do it. You have to use your ultimate to get in, so this is a bit more range to do it. And of course, when you do use Crescent Slash, you actually cannot move for like a brief instant, and that might be enough for someone to get out of auto attack range. So a usability change. Alistar, his trample is getting nerfed. The reason for this is they want to nerf his jungle. This is aimed at his jungle because right now, if you've been watching the pro scene, he's just too good in the jungle. He will gank you like crazy. They want to just curb it a bit. Make him a bit weaker. Stem is what I want to say too. I want to use both the word curb and stem, but can't use them both. So they're going to slow it down a bit, make it a bit hard to use. This is a good change overall because he's still going to be a great ganker, but he's more dependent on getting ganks off. And the Triumphant Roar change right there is important because it's aimed at support Alistar. So this actually might affect him as a support. We may not see him quite as often in that support role. The reason they're changing it is because right now his heal is one of the most efficient heals in the game. By making it inefficient earlier ranks, Alistar will have to put more points into it. Normally you see either Headbutt or Pulverize get maxed out second with like 1 or 2 early points into the Triumphant Roar. So there's now incentive to actually put points into the heal early on and to a higher level. This may actually destroy him as a support role. I do not know for sure, but it's going to make it a lot harder just to sustain down there on his own. Caitlyn. Now this is entirely a game design thing. They just want Caitlyn's ultimate to feel more sniperish. So it's going to have a high range, a lower channel time, and really you can do a bit more with it. So now if you're bot lane, you can roam mid, possibly get a good snipe off, but it's not a huge gameplay changer. The fact that it is there does mean you can get some good picks though. And they do want to make Caitlyn feel like a sniper because right now when you play Caitlyn, do you ever feel like a sniper? Is that ever something you go where it's like, man, I'm sniping dudes? I don't personally. So maybe you do, but if you don't right now, maybe they'll change it. And if you already feel like a sniper, guess what? You're going to feel more like a sniper. Actually, this Darius change. This is actually a nice little change. When you are fighting, say, Shaco, and you're up against Darius, he can go ahead and use his ultimate to finish off a clone and see if it's the real you. Of course, he still has the ultimate off, so if you guessed wrong, he can now guess right. This also matters for characters like Yorick and Mordekaiser. They no longer can lose their ghost just because he ultimates it, and he can still be effective. If he wants to kill one of those characters, one of those ghosts, and one of the Shaco clones, it's now an investment. Mundo now can turn off Burning Agony as he pleases. Blade Walt's cooldown being reduced, so 150 to 110 was the original, now it's 130 at rank 1 to 110 at rank 3. The reason Blade Walt's her ultimate has its cooldown reduced is because frankly, right now she's too dependent on it, so she needs it. Riot, they want to find a good way to balance Riposte and the rest of her skill kit, because if Riposte works really well, it's one of the most obnoxious skills in the game. If it works okay, which right now it's at a very okay spot, it's a good skill. They want to try and balance it out, make sure she's not too good, and they're just slowly adjusting it, approaching it from a cautious standpoint, so we don't see just a broken Fiora pop out. But now she can go ahead and use her ultimate a bit more in the laning phase, a bit more early game, which is really important because she is so dependent on it. Gragas is actually a massive change. Gragas might be a viable mid now. From a tournament perspective, one of the problems he has is when you're Gragas in the mid lane, you take a lot of auto attack damage. People just hit you with auto attacks, Annie with her 650 or 625 range, Anivia with her 600 range. Well, there's two examples. Everybody has good auto attack damage though, because Gragas can't really reciprocate with his own auto attacks unless he engages. So he can now take that damage. Body Slam is going to make him really hard to catch too. It's already a good escape skill, but now it's almost like a blink. It's not quite instant, but it's very fast, very mobile. He's going to be able to catch people off guard aggressively, and defensively, if you try and gank Gragas now, he'll probably just get away because of how fast he'll move. So overall, a change just to make him more mobile, more defensive, and more aggressive at the same time. I think because of the auto attack damage he will not be taking, he might be a viable tournament pick. He already is a situational tournament pick, but this is going to make him that much more usable. Janna. So this is all aimed at support Janna. AP Janna is slightly affected. The passive movement speed reduction at earlier ranks means that with 1 point in her double, you are no longer one of the fastest characters in the game. And the slow, it's just a really long slow. They want to make her more in line with other slows. A 3-second slow is still a good slow, but 4 seconds? That's huge. That's one of the longest slows in the game. There are other, longer slows, other slows that can be chained together, like Gangplank's passive, for example, but that requires, a melee range investment, or like some other setup. Janna's really doesn't. So, cutting back her CC a bit. And Monsoon. The reason Monsoon is being nerfed is twofold. The reason number one is it is a good skill. So when you use Monsoon, you reset fights. Early on in the game, it's almost impossible to catch a Janna when you get Monsooned away. You have to blow Flash. You don't have, say, a Phantom Dancer to close a distance. You don't have a Phage to apply slows. When you're level 6 and don't have a whole lot of items, her ultimate just stops any sort of aggression in fighting. You can follow up with it, within that 2-minute time span, but if she gets her ultimate back up, kind of the same deal, you probably won't get a gank off. Now, there's a bigger time span. You can now punish her more often for using her ultimate. You can be more aggressive in the bot lane because there's going to be a wider period of time where you can punish her. And the other reason that her ultimate reduces in cooldown as you leveled up is because there's no reason to really level it right now. I mean, the heal goes up. That's what happens right now. And the heal increasing is nice, but frankly, you don't use Janna's ultimate for the heal. Use it for usually a brief, like maybe a half second or second of channeling. So maybe 40 HP might be regained. But now with her ultimate gonna have a reduced cooldown as you leveled up, there's a reason to put points into it. I mean, if you do put points into Janna's ultimate, that's not bad, but frankly, there's not a huge reason to. You can avoid it and get away with it pretty well. Karthus. His ultimate is getting nerfed. I'm going to cover this with a bunch of stuff, but Karthus specifically, he changes how the game is played by being in the game. That's still going to be the case. You still have to deal with his ultimate. But right now, as it is, imagine you're against a Karthus. How do you play? You play as if you're missing 200 or so HP, because if he uses that ultimate, he can finish you off. So early on in the game, he's no longer going to have to be, he's no longer going to be able to go ahead and execute you quite as often. You can now play safer and play more aggressively because of that, because you will have that HP that will not be instantly taken away from Karthus halfway across the map. You can do more stuff. So you can be aggressive, you can be safer as you be aggressive in the end. And his ultimate having a long cooldown later on means that if you do fight a Karthus, when he respawns, when the next fight happens, he won't have his ultimate up for the most part if it's quick enough. Right now, if you get into a fight with Karthus, let's just say it's a double ace or something, like the fight takes a full respawn before it happens again. Usually he'll have some cooldown reduction. Blue buff might have been used when he had his ultimate up. He'll have his ultimate up for the most part, like he should be up. And because of that, you have to fight dangerously again because he'll have that ultimate. Now that is not the case. Now if you go ahead and pressure him quickly and early and he doesn't have a lot of cooldown reduction, guess what? You can actually fight him again without his ultimate up. So that's a pretty big change. He will still be viable. He will be a much more situational pick rather than one of the best picks in the game. You can still build a team composition around him, focusing on getting ganks off while he supports from the mid lane, but it's no longer they have Karthus. If they reach the 40-minute mark, they'll win the game just because every fight they'll have his ultimate up. Kennen has a lower attack range. This is because he has one of the best attack ranges in the game at 575. The average for AD carries is 550. I've never been too sure why he has that auto attack range, but he also has some of the best AD carry stats in the game. Look it up. He's actually seriously one of the best, just stat-wise, AD carries. But he's a bit more in line. He didn't need that extra range. He's still a good character. This will hurt him a tiny bit as an AD carry, but we don't see that too often, and he'll be fine in other roles. Kog'Maw. So AP Kog'Maw takes another hit. This is just to kind of nerf how he is as a burst caster. So this kind of affects Xerath too, but right now he can spam his Living Artillery later on in the game once he has blue buff, once he has a maxed out tier, and he does not run out of mana. He just keeps spamming and spamming and spamming. Now he actually has to take a break at some point. You can still spam up to probably 7 or so spells, but then once you're at that 10 spell mark, where it's 400 mana per Living Artillery, you have to back off. So this is just to make him a bit less consistent with harass. You have to be a bit more managing of your mana, and you have to be careful. So Kog'Maw can now actually be pressured in a teamfight much more often because he might go out of mana. As it is now with the blue buff, you really don't. So overall changes just to make him a bit weaker. He's still a good poker, but he's not as good a sustained poker, if that makes sense. He will still be viable in tournaments, probably a little less common, and we'll see a lot more pressure coming out towards his blue buff because of that. LeBlanc, this is a nice little usability change. It's now harder to react to her silence, because Signal of Speed just has a faster movement speed, or missile speed, so you can kind of boom boom, launch him out very quickly, and apply that silence super fast. It's a good change, not game breaking. You can do the Signal of Silence Distortion combo very well now, very quickly. It will make her a little more fun to play, and of course the reduction on Distortion has a lower cooldown by 2 seconds across all ranks. It's just usability, makes her a little more fun to play, because right now it doesn't have a long cooldown, and she kind of needs that skill to do a lot. Now, casting Mimic Distortion no longer disables her original Distortion. What happens now, let's say you use her Distortion, use it once, you blink, cool, you can still go back to your original. Use her ultimate to use that Distortion again, you can no longer go back to the original. So now you can, now you're going to have lots of really cool juke potential, so there'll be some cool YouTube videos of that, but not going to be a massive gameplay change. Lux, these changes are all designed to make her a bit more usable. Right now, if you're someone like Chu8 who is good at her, this will not be a huge change. You'll be able to, be aggressive with your spells, but Light Binding has a ridiculous mana cost right now. Finos Funkelin? Oh boy, has a decent mana cost, but still fairly high. Just making her a bit easier to spam. Her skills are not that impressive, if that makes sense. So it's not quite the same as Kog'Maw, who's Living Artillery. You spam like crazy and you can devastate a team. Her spells are good, but they're not really that good that they really deserve a high mana cost. Misfortune. Double Up has a better attack range. There's a reason they're not listing numbers, is because it sounds like a nerf in the patch notes. So it's a bit more usable, a bit better, and Make It Rain now has a static mana cost. This makes it a possible viable option to level up second. The problem before is when you level up Make It Rain, she has one of the worst mana dependencies in the game as an attack damage carry. Kind of like Graves, but her skills are not as consistently good. So Double Up is a good skill, but it eats up mana. Make It Rain is a good skill, but it eats up mana. And of course, Impure Shots is kind of dependent on Double Up and Make It Rain for the CC and the extra auto attack to use. So they want to make her a bit less mana dependent, which is important because right now she's got huge mana problems. If you play Misfortune right now, you will go out of mana and you will just kind of be caught off guard with that. But making her a bit more usable, I would like to see Make It Rain leveled up second now, occasionally, and it probably does make her a much more viable AD carry actually, because that slow, that 52% slow, that's a really good slow. That's an amazing slow. So, I mean, giving a carry some sort of CC like Ashe, for example, giving her a slow like that might just not break her, but make her viable. Nautilus, Dredge Line, less damage at earlier ranks, higher cooldown at earlier ranks. Depth Charge, less damage at earlier ranks, higher cooldown at earlier ranks. These changes are designed to make him worse early game if there wasn't a trend there. I think part of this is Riot doesn't quite know how to adjust Nautilus. The big problem is he has so much CC, but they don't want to just destroy his kit, so they're taking it from a very safe perspective. They're not going to try and just break his damage and break his CC. Just tone down the damage a bit, see if that's enough. Right now, Nautilus is one of the best characters in the game. This cooldown reduction, or increase, 140 to 120, from 120, that's a big deal. Because right now, Depth Charge, it's one of the best ganking skills in the game. You get hit by it, you probably will die for the most part. So I'm glad they're changing this, and it's overall an improvement. Nunu. Visionary going from 5 stacks to 7, or 7 stacks to 5 stacks. So this is not too big of a change for support Nunu. It's the buff to jungle Nunu and any sort of top lane or mid Nunu, which you don't see a lot, but might actually be more viable because he does have mana problems, and they're going to be much smaller now. Consume is buffed. It's actually a pretty important buff because right now, if you do have, say, a Nunu at Baron, his consume only does half damage, so it's only a 250 nuke to a 450 nuke. Now it is true damage. Now it will just go ahead and be amazing. Nunu might be one of the best Baron stealers in the game, actually, because it's a 900 damage nuke. Unfortunately, this isn't a huge buff for Jungle Nunu. You don't put that many points into it early because you need your Snowball to be leveled up for the slow. Absolute Zero, I had no idea Absolute Zero could do 0% damage. So, nice little usability change. Overall, this is actually going to be a bigger deal for a solo Nunu. Jungle Nunu might be viable, but I'm not positive about that. I have to see it in action. So, we might see more Nunu. This does not buff support Nunu a whole lot, but now that you do have an extra character who pretty much has a smite, that is actually a pretty cool thing to have. It's a very unique skill, so we might see early points of consume coming out onto Nunus. Orianna. Now this Orianna, this entire like big change log, actually does it even fit on what I have? Not quite. So I will just break this down from a general standpoint. I do not know how the players feel about this, but they're making her skill more usable. The big changes are going to be command attack. It has a lower cooldown at higher ranks. So her ball is much more movable, but it's a little bit slower, and the command attack does a little bit more damage, or less damage. The reason for this is they want to make her other skills, Dissonance and Protect, a bit more usable. So as you can see, Dissonance will do more damage, and Command Protect, it now has this line right here. The ball will now respond faster to Dissonance and Shockwave commands. I'm not positive what that means in action. I think it means that either you'll press a button and they'll be able to, the spells will go off quicker. The ball could just move quicker when you use Dissonance and Shockwave. I'm pretty sure it just means the spell will go off quicker though. Wait, why is it in Protect? Actually, yeah, I think it... Okay, I can't give a positive readout about this, but they want to make her more usable in the sense that she will just be able to cast her spells more often. Right now, that big change up here, global spell cooldown reduced from 0.15 seconds, or from 5 to 0.15. That means that right now, when you cast her command attack to somebody who's next to you, it will be harder to actually land your command dissonance because you have that global cooldown to deal with. So this makes her a bit more usable in cases like that. They've nerfed her overall ranged poking ability, like in lane her bot will be worse. But in general teamfights, she will be stronger. I do not know if that will affect her positively or negatively, or even neutral in the tournament scene. Players like Salsa will be the ones who really, say if they have a good Orianna still. Will Nubby Pooh Bear still a player? I don't know. I'll actually have to double check and ask them, but of course that will be after the patch. Rammus, a bit more usable. It's a nice little buff. Nothing too significant. Lower mana cost. Right now when you hit somebody with Powerball, you kind of like walk into them, then you like look away for a sec. You will no longer look away for a sec. Shen, his ultimate is being nerfed along with many other global ultimates, like Karthus's. It's kind of the same thing where he changes how the game is played. Now you have to like act like your enemy has a bunch more HP. He can always split push later on just because the cooldown at 120 seconds isn't that long. And with long respawn times, you'll respawn, you can just kind of split push away. So now you have to be a bit more cautious when using his ultimate. There's a big sacrifice now. And it's, a cool little change. And Singe is going to look fly. Okay, Hymn of Valor change. This is cool for Sona. If you played Sona before, she used to be one of the best supports in the game. Just auto-attack harass with her power chord. It was awesome and amazing, actually. They're killing it, though. The reason they killed it, though, because it was just too good. Now, her auto-attack harass is going to be more consistent. You can spam it a lot more. But it's no longer as high a damage as it used to be back in, like, January. So they gave her a bit more sustained damage, and you no longer go out of mana doing it. But it's no longer devastating. So it's a good change overall, because she will not just be a big bully, but she'll be a bully that can kind of do well. And this, by the way, if you played Sona, sometimes prioritization never seemed to work right. That's because apparently it just didn't have a good range. So now you will be able to get more Qs offline, more Hymns of Valor. It's a good change, and I would like to see Sona more often, especially because characters like Soraka are getting nerfed. That's a big nerf right there. Astral Blessing is one of the best spells in the game. It doubles the armor of most characters. With 105 armor buff, that's massive. So it's only going to last 3 seconds. You can now trade with her more often in lane. When that heal falls off, you have to apply pressure, and you will now have a great opportunity to do it. Wish, kind of the same thing as everything else, where it's like, okay, you no longer have to deal with people having an extra 200 or so HP. Longer cooldown, it's a consistent change. Now, I actually didn't notice this. Veigar was getting extra AP from killing Shaco clones. Xerath. This is a big change, but is it big enough? I am not the person to go ahead and look about this. There's actually a write-up I'll put in the League of Legends thread. I do not know if this is good enough for Xerath. He recently had its ultimate changed, though. It now has a longer delay between casts. So right now you can cast it once every 1.25 seconds. Before it was like every 0.3 or something. Maybe even a little more, a little less. But he can no longer just instantly blow 2 or 3 of his spells in one stun, so it's a huge deal. Ziggs, a little less mana dependent. He still will have the mana dependency problems, though. That's not quite low enough to make him free of it, but nice little change. And this change I love. It almost sounds pointless, because if the target does not die, then your ultimate didn't do anything. But I kind of like it, and of course there is a mental deterrent of attacking somebody with Chrono Shift. So even if it doesn't, actively do anything, it might have changed how a fight went. Athene's Holy Grail is gonna be a little bit better. It might be usable. It's a hard item to place just because AP itemization right now is really good. But characters like a Navy will probably pick it up more often. Same with Veigar, just mana-dependent characters we'll see it more often on. Kog'Maw, with his new nerf, will probably want to pick it up. Ionic Spark, they're trying to make a bit more tanky, a bit more better. I think right now, in terms of just overall damage, it's actually going to be about as viable as Wits End against less mana, or less magical damage teams. So, overall, good change. A Quicksilver Sash getting a little nerf. I like this. Quicksilver Sash, one of the best items in the game. It will still be picked up, but it didn't need that +8 magic resist from upgrading it, and making it more expensive is not a bad thing, because think of characters like Malzahar. Malzahar gets shut down by Quicksilver Sash. Ignite, nice little change. And overall, a few changes of the Proving Grounds, but nothing too big. This is a cool little change. You no longer have to do your own Baron and Dragon timers if you see it die. And yeah, that was it for the changes overall. The big changes are going to be the changes to the global ultimates and Janna's ultimate. So Soraka, Shen, Karthus, they're just worse now. That's a good thing. They dominated the metagame. Characters like Karthus, you will build your team around it, and it was almost impossible to stop it sometimes. If you look at solo mid and how they played in MLG Anaheim, I want to say they picked Karthus in 6 out of 6 games for the finals. So that's how good Karthus was. That's how much they relied on Karthus. But it's overall a really good patch. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead, leave them, and I will check them out. See ya, folks.